For the ones who do not yet know me, I'm Eric Bernheim, the president of the Association of the Swiss Friends of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. The association, its delegate, Julie Bunion, Julie, and its committee members present here are pleased to welcome you to this roundtable discussion on AI, artificial intelligence impact on society, which I expect to be flabbergasting. Julie, at the end of the conference, will entertain you a few minutes rapidly about what is Hebrew University Jerusalem, its activities, our association, and so on. Artificial intelligence is a much discussed topic. However, it is difficult to make sure one understands exactly what it is, and it is even more difficult to project the impact it may have on society and on each of us. This is why we organized this roundtable with protagonists, I would say, of two very different sides. We have the scientific side with Henry and Idan, who probably understand way more than anyone in the world how the brain is working and what could be the future of artificial intelligence. And we've got Xavier and Eric, who basically have to deal with the consequences of all those developments and how is it going to be impacting us in our daily life. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, Henry, for hosting us tonight at this fabulous biotech campus. And some of us who have seen some of the fantastic pictures and research you are doing. And as you said, the brain going out of here is already different from our brain coming into this building. Before engaging in what I expect to be a fascinating discussion, let me introduce you to our distinguished speakers. And as you will hear, I must confess that reading their CVs and trying to extract part of it was a very humbling exercise. So Xavier Auberson, there, many of you know him. Xavier is professor of Swiss and International Tax Law at the University of Geneva since 1994. After studies at the University of Geneva, where he obtained a law degree, a Master's of Advanced Studies, and a doctorate PhD in law in 1990, he pursued his studies at Harvard Law School, where he finalized an LLM and also completed the International Tax Program. He is very active in various associations, expert committees, and foundations. And in this context, he regularly drafts legal opinions, collaborates on various tax reforms, and takes part in parliament sessions. He has published numerous books and articles. Since 2016, he has initiated research on the potential taxation of robots. In this context, he gave the opening lecture at the University of Geneva in February 2017, and very recently published a book, Taxing Robots, from the emergence of an electronic ability to pay to exact tax on robots and the use of robots. And I must say that already reading the first pages, I was quite intrigued by saying, does a robot have a legal personality or not? That was quite challenging. Professor Robertson also practices as an attorney at law, is member of the Geneva Bar, partner of Robertson Abel in Geneva, which is a law firm specialized in tax or commercial matters. In addition, and it is another facet of him, he's member of the board of the Montreux Jazz Festival, president of the Montreux Jazz Artists Foundation and of the Centre d'Art Contemporain in Geneva. In 2012, you were awarded the STEP Private Client Award, the Geoffrey Schindler Award for Outstanding Contribution to the Profession. Idan Segev. Professor Idan Segev is the head of the Patrick Drahi Lab in Computational Neuroscience and former director of the Interdisciplinary Center for Neural Computation, the seed of the new Edmond and Lili Safra Center for Brain Science, ELSEC, at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He received his Bachelor of Science in 1973 in Math and PhD in 1982 in Experimental and Theoretical Neurobiology. His research teams utilizes theoretical tools in order to study how neurons, the elementary microchip of the brain, as well as networks of neurons, compute and dynamically adapt to the ever-changing environment. In recent years, his labs collaborates with several groups worldwide, in particular with Henry Markram and the Blue Brain project team here, in an endeavor to model and simulate pieces of the human brain, trying to understand what makes each of us unique. He does also take pride in his role as chief editor of Frontier for Young Minds, a free scientific journal for kids, written by scientists and reviewed by kids. He then takes a keen interest in the connection between brain and art. Eric Hazan. Eric is a senior partner of McKinsey & Company based in Paris, and is member of the McKinsey Global Institute Council, the research arm of McKinsey. He leads McKinsey marketing and sales practice in Europe and focuses on strategic and operational issues with specific expertise in digital and analytics transformation. And he also counsels top management across several European countries. Over the past 10 years, Eric has also advised several governments and public leaders on topics related to digital innovation and industry policies. He has also led the McKinsey Global Institute report on the impact of artificial intelligence and how to accelerate Europe digitization, and a report regarding the digital transformation of French companies. He co-authored several reports about the impact on the internet on the economies, which have been published and presented at the various G8 summits. In addition to his consulting activities, Eric served several years as special advisor to a former French Minister of Finance on industrial innovation and digital policy. Eric holds a Master of Science degree in Management from HEC Paris and is a professor for business strategy at HEC and Sciences Po, the French School of Political Science. We know, Eric, you will have to leave us a little bit ahead of your colleagues, and we thank you in advance for doing this very short trip, I think 3 hours in Geneva, just to attend this roundtable. Thank you. Henry Markram, our host. Henry Markram is an Israeli, obtained his Bachelor of Science degree in Physiology and the History and Philosophy of Science from University of Cape Town, South Africa, and his PhD in Neurobiology from the Weizmann Institute in Israel in 1991. During his PhD work, he discovered a link between acetylcholine and memory mechanisms. Following his PhD, Henry went to the United States as a Fulbright scholar at the National Institute of Health, then went to the Max Planck Institute in Heidelberg, before being appointed assistant professor at the Weizmann Institute of Science. In 2002, he moved to EPFL as a full professor and founder director of the Brain Mind Institute and director of the Center for Neuroscience and Technology. In 2013, the European Union funded the Human Brain Project, led by Henry, to the tune of $1.3 billion. On October 8, 2015, the Blue Brain Project published the first digital reconstruction and simulation of the microcircuitry of a neonatal rat, summatory sensory cortex. And I spare to you all the very technical description of all what he has been finding. I thought it would have been too much to try to explain it. So the format of this discussion is the following. We will try by having each of our speakers answer very simple questions for 5 minutes each, roughly, and then we will engage in the roundtable discussion with a few questions I will ask them and questions coming from the floor. So to start with, Idan, what is exactly artificial intelligence and machine learning? Can you explain to us what it is and demystify all what we hear about it? You have to press the button.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric, and thank you for coming. And especially thank you, Julie, for organizing it. We spoke about it a long time ago. And not only on behalf of me, but also the Hebrew University, and Henry, of course, as a host. So I want to just start by giving a little bit perspective before I'm answering this particular question. So we are sitting here in the 21st century speaking about AI, but actually it started in some sense in the Bible, because the golem, who is a well-known entity, it mentions only one time in the Bible, the golem is supposed to be the thing that we create that will be similar to us. And in some sense, along the years, there is this issue about the golem and the fear of the golem, and later on, you know, there was the golem of Prague, and then later on there was the Frankenstein of Mary Shelley on the 19th century, and now we are in the golem, speaking about the golem of the AI. So I think the whole thing is about to ask about these long-standing fears from the golem, for the Bible golem, along the Frankenstein, and today, what is new, should we be afraid, and all that. So your question is, and my role was, as we discussed with Eric, is to just to explain very fast why is there this excitement today, what is so new today about AI that we didn't have, let's say, 30, 40 years ago. And my answer is, and that's something very important that you should understand, that the big leap, the big change in the world of AI is the fact that you can develop machines, and you must develop machines that learn from experience. So up until recently, people spoke about AI in MIT and in other places, in Golem and so forth, but these machines were prefixed. Everything was designed a priori. There was a machine, and the hope was that this machine would be able to do things in the world. We realized a long time ago that without learning, without the capability of the brain to change through experience, there is no real intelligence in any sense. It would be very simple, specific capability, and that's all. What happened in the last several years, 30 years or so, there is a theory for learning in the brain. We understand, and Henry implements it also in the Blue Brain, we understand basic principles whereby the brain now is changing when you do something new, when you learn something new, when you listen to me, when you see the letter A, when you recognize a new face, what is happening in the brain when you learn. And these principles, these few principles, which I can elaborate later if you have time, were now borrowed to the machine. So the new generation of machine are the machine learning machines, these machines that changes in their architecture, in their connectivity of these artificial machines in order to be able to learn from examples. So for example, if you want to have an automated car, machine that drives and learns the road, like we learn when I'm starting to drive from here to Geneva, this machine, through experience, see many examples of the thing it needs to learn. And the beauty of this new theory of machine learning is that through these experiences, through these examples, the machine not only learns what it already saw before, so my face, Henry face, Eric face, but after seeing enough faces, the new algorithm of machine learning enables the machine to recognize a new face as a face. So this is what we call generalization. Enough examples enable the machine to generalize to a new example that it never saw. And this is essential for a learning machine because, you know, Amnon Shashua, Mobileye, or the Google machine that drives will not be able to see all the crossroads and all the pavements and all the red lights and all the directions a priori. You cannot do that. So you have to see enough crossroads and enough lights in order to generalize to a new environment, to a new place, and not make a mistake there. And that's what these machines can do today. They learn. So the big, really breakthrough in AI is the fact that the machine can change through experience. They learn. I think it's enough for now.
Henry, now that we know what machine learning is, how broad is the spectrum of AI and machine learning going forward, and how do you think it may disrupt today's world, be it positive or negative?
Anything. We can automate many processes. You know, the future farmer, he's going to sit in his penthouse in New York City, and he's going to have his farm on a screen, and he will control everything from that screen. He's never going to see his farm. Maybe he will visit it one day or before he dies, but he's going to sit there. There's an old joke that about this particular example, and they say the future farmer, there will be only a future farmer, the screen, and a dog. The role of the dog is to stop the farmer from touching the machine. Okay. So it's going to disrupt. So you will see farming, although, you know, there's a positive side to that because nobody wants to be farmers today. It's labor intensive, and so it may actually solve the farming labor problem. But what it does mean is that, you know, there's going to be, the farming is going to be very different. Cars, driving cars, trucks, 10 million truck drivers in the US and all over. It's a difficult problem to solve. It's not going to be solved soon. I don't think that you're going to see self-driving cars in the next 5 years. I think that you'll see them definitely probably in 10 years from now, within 10 years. But that's not a long time. 10 years is very soon. So there will be self-driving cars, there will be networked. It's going to be like taking an elevator. So no more drivers, no more taxis, no more, this is gone. The doctor of the future is going to be completely different. You will have a few doctors, but they will have millions of patients. And the machine will tell them only those very few that they really need to look at. And escalate it to different specialists and so on. And you will sit there with universal and all-powerful medical capability, because the future AI is going to put you in the context of every other person on the planet. So you will get the most personal, individual, custom treatment that is imaginable. We will have spectacular, we will live very long. So you will see this entire disruption in healthcare. There's even AI that is now trying to estimate what is changing in your body with age and how you can prevent it. So you will have longevity AI. So we're all going to live forever without jobs. So it's going to be an amazing, amazing situation. You're going to have travel agents, they're already gone, but they will be replaced more and more and more. Everything that can be automated, and especially that can be predicted. And that's where the good news comes in. I don't see such a bad thing. I actually don't want to. You know, there's a lot of social science that shows that we are very predictable in how we behave, what we buy, how much we pay for something, what clothes we want to do. So for example, if I show you 2 chocolate bars, and they both equal, you like them both the same, and one cost, $10, and the other one costs $1. On a population level, most of you will choose the $10 bar. You won't choose the cheapest one because you think something's wrong with it. You will choose the more expensive one. This comes out statistical. Now, this will be built in, and people will predict exactly how much to charge you and not you. There will be different pricing. So we are very predictable. And actually that's where I see the good news coming in. Because, I mean, do you like running around most of the time, if you really thought about it, that most of your behavior is predictable? I think if it is, it should be replaced by a machine. I want to spend my time on what's not predictable. And maybe it will elevate us because we will remove this predictability. It's going to be a challenge. We're going to have to find different careers. But the way to think about that, I think, everybody has a different opinion here, is that AI is becoming the problem solver, but not the problem poser. It's not defining the problem. So we're going to see a bifurcation where AI is solving problems, but we are posing the problems.
To AI.
To AI. We design the questions. And in fact, if you think about it, asking the right question is the most difficult thing to do. You know, you can ask any question and then you can start solving it, but asking the right question for something is a very difficult thing to do. It's not going to be easy for AI to replace that intention, that goal. Where should the planet go? Where should you go? What kind of things do you like? So I think that, it's clear. Jobs are going to be radically, and we can talk more about it, radically disrupted. And probably the solution is tax the robots, because otherwise, we're going to have to find a different occupation. But it's going to be around directing what AI does.
Thank you. So at least I retain one point, which is disruption. And this is a predictive thing that many things will be disrupted quite soon. So, Eric, what is the in your sense, the impact of those disruptions on society, and what should governments and society start thinking about or doing?
So discussing a bit earlier with Henry, I understood that we're very far with artificial intelligence on anything that the brain can do. But the irritating news is that technically with the artificial intelligence as it is, as you were saying, we are disrupting potentially the society as it is very, very heavily. So at the McKinsey Global Institute, we have been a bit, I would say, pedestrian. So you must have read lots and lots of studies that are saying that all jobs will disappear, but we try to understand effectively, you know, what kind of tasks can be really automated and what kind of impact with different scenarios it really can have, let's not say in 50 years, but let's say in 2030 on the developed economies, okay? So we kind of took 800 jobs, we disaggregated that into 2,000 tasks and then into 25 skills, and we said, okay, what will happen? So average scenarios is that it's not like half of the job that will disappear and that will be completely automated in 15 years from now. It's approximately 10%. So 10% of the job will be automated 95%. But this is important, but there will be other job created. Okay, we are in the industrial revolution, so we will see other job creators. But there are a few things that we will nevertheless have to manage. First, 60% of the current jobs in a developed economy will have 30 to 40% of their tasks automated. So that means that if you have a job, approximately 1/3 of what you do will be completely automated. So that's a more even important disruption than some jobs being completely automated. But that is triggering a full reskilling of all companies that we are working with. So the main fashionable discussion that we have with CEOs now is how can we do some workforce planning? How can we project the way that people will work and the training kind of needs that we will have to perform in the next 15 years. Other thing, so in this automation of 60% of the job, of the 1/3 of 60% of the job, what will happen is that there will be a lot of pressure on the middle class. A lot of the jobs that were performed, you know, since the 50s, so we had this golden age of the 30 years after the World War II, that created a big middle class in the big developed countries. And what we see, for example, in the US is that middle class was approximately like something like 60% of the labor population, and it's getting now to 50% in a few years. So what is happening is that the structure of the labor force in the next years, and that's not me saying, it's two very distinguished economists from the MIT that maybe you know, Eric Binofson, Andrew McAfee. I advise you to read their book, very, very thin, 150 pages. And so what they say is that the structure of the labor force will evolve to an hourglass. A lot of the job on the top, a lot of the job on the bottom, and the middle class will be squeezed. So what is at the source, not the only source of what is happening with yellow vest in France, no? So what is happening is the following. So you have a lot of pressure on the jobs as they are. And then you have a lot of pressure and precarity on the wages as they are and as they will be. So a kind of precarization, I don't know if it's a word in English, of the middle class and the pressure on the wages. So we have several kind of problems ahead of this, and I will try to be short on that one. So first, I mentioned it, reskilling and redesign or redesign for companies. Remember, companies, we work with companies at McKinsey, and Eric knows that very well, and these companies, they are already completely destabilized by the first wave of digital, okay? Just have website with e-commerce and so on, it's already stabilizing. So now we come with a second wave of digital, which is AI. So I can tell you that they are destabilized, but they are working on it, but it's very destabilizing. So reskilling, retraining, or redesigning companies. And then pressure on the middle class, so a lot of pressure on the way the organization of the society and labor force is organized. Then there is a bit of hope. Let me finish with a story, okay? So I was reading a lot of articles on paralegals, maybe you know that. So these articles were telling me, you know, paralegal will be completely automated. So the guys were doing some research in law firm. They will be completely automated in the in the future. So I was trying to understand if in the US, which is one of the advanced kind of economy, paralegal were disappearing. And I saw that in fact the demand, we're talking about demand of skills, and I can elaborate on this later on, the demand for paralegals was in fact increasing in the US. So in fact there are two populations in paralegal. There are paralegals that don't know how to use the new tools, using machine learning and so on. These ones, they are decreasing like hell. The people that have been trained, that have been reskilled with the new tools, that the demand is increasing like hell. So, good discussion.
Thank you. You talked about Eric, you said the middle class is going to be disappearing. But if I'm not mistaken, it's the middle class that pays most of the taxes today. Eric, Xavier, you came up with the idea of taxing robots. How did you come to this idea, and why you believe that taxing robot may be a potential solution?
Yes, I think there, let's say we can summarize, I'm so sorry because my voice, I would need a robot to replace me soon because my voice is going away. But there are, let's say, two different schools of thoughts. You have the optimists who say that, yes, it's the fourth industrial revolution, but as in the past, you see automation, you see new technology that will bring new jobs, and at the end, maybe there will be even more jobs than before, and we will be even better off. Very summarized. You have the pessimists, and the pessimists, they say, this is the famous sentence, this time it's different. Because this time is different. You describe very well that, in fact, these machines are slowly replacing the brain. So before the machine would replace the arms of the worker, but now they are replacing the brain, and maybe in the future they might even be smarter than the brain. So the pessimists, they say, we are going to eventually to lose even any jobs will be affected. As you said, there will be disruption everywhere, and maybe at the end, the job as we know it will disappear. I'm not able to tell you who is right or who is wrong. Is it the optimist or is it the pessimist? But the problem is that it's a serious problem, and especially in the world of taxation, you see the time it takes to find a global consensus of such issues. So my point is to say we need to think about solution right now, and one solution is to tax robots. Maybe at the end, if we see that there are more jobs created, we might not need this tax. But if the pessimists are right, or even, frankly, half right, we might need this tax. So the big question is, of course, how do you design and how do you implement this tax? In fact, in Switzerland, we have a concept which I think could help us. It's a bit provocative, but some people that know me know sometimes I like to be a bit provocative. And this concept is the taxation on rental value on homeowners. If you own a house in Switzerland, you know very well that you have to pay a tax every year, and this tax is on the so-called imputed income. It corresponds to the rent that you should have paid to live in this house. Now, if you take this concept of income, you could make the case for a robot tax. Because you could say, okay, you have an enterprise, you are using robots instead of a human worker, so you are sparing the salary that you should have paid in order to have the work done. It's exactly the same concept as the imputed rent. So this is one economic solution. So there are various possibilities, but one of the possibilities would be then to implement eventually, I'm talking about 10 years, 20 years from now. I've received a lot of criticism, you can imagine, and some people don't realize this concept is a concept for the future. Don't worry, we won't have a robot tax by January 2020. Just as a joke to tell you, when I made this conference 3 years ago in Geneva, I received even some insult by email. And one even anonymous email telling me, stop your research. Can you imagine? So then I felt, oh, so maybe this is worth continuing to study, right? So,
But was it from a robot?
I don't know yet. Exactly. And I would end up this description by following your point to say, with a warning. We should be careful because maybe one day the robot will refuse to pay the tax.
Which is interesting, what you're saying is you refer to the time axis. You say it's going to take time if we ever get to taxing robots. You, Eric, you said it's already here when we have to start dealing with the consequences, and corporations are already destabilized, and probably governments also. And you both say basically we're just at the beginning of that story. So if I ask both of you, what is the speed at which you see all these new machine learning capabilities developing? Do you see an acceleration compared to what we've seen over the past 5 or 10 years? And what are if you were to project how fast it will develop in the coming 5 to 10 years, what would be your message then to the, I would say, economic side in terms of urgency?
So the way that the current technology is implemented, for the current state of art, there are many different approaches today that have been done. This approach is actually already hitting a wall. That means that it's not going to get a lot better. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to replace, because there's just so much to be automated. And anybody that has a company should just sit back and ask, what can be automated? Because that's going to be gone. And that's where you can cut costs and save. So even without AI today getting better technically, there are fundamental problems with AI that will not allow it to actually get much better than it is today. But even with that barrier, I think it is a huge wave. It's going to sweep across anybody and everybody that can be where automation can happen, especially where it's predictable. When it becomes more difficult to predict, that's when humans step in. But the predictable, automatable, it's going to happen even with what we know today. So that's the bad news. The good news is that I don't think that AI, without a major change in the technology, and probably only coming from this kind of, really from the brain, will take us to another level. So I don't think that there is today the technology to make us worried that we're going to get human kind of machines and robots that are going to act and behave and think and be like us. And I think that there's a lot of hype in the community, and people make it like AI is going to come and it's going to become superhuman. And today AI is actually extremely simple compared to what the brain is doing. We're hundreds of miles away from what the brain can do. But nevertheless, it's going to disrupt, and it is disrupting. So there's a good and a bad part to it. So if it gets much more powerful, it is going to be a major sociological challenge.
I totally agree with Henry, and I want to make a clear distinction, an important distinction between weak AI and strong AI. So what we are seeing today is really weak AI. You take a task, you need to recognize faces, you develop a machine or a network algorithm that is expert in recognizing faces. And if you need another expert machine that will recognize music, then you develop a whole different network that will specialize in recognizing Beethoven versus Bach, or within Bach, this sonata or another. This is a very specialized, localized, extremely good, better than us, in this particular task. So this is wonderful because these automated machines, the automated drivers, will do better than us. They will not fall asleep, there will be less accidents, and they will become expert in doing driving and recognizing faces, or somebody crossing the road and so forth. Very specific. The whole thing about the brain, and Henry mentioned it, is this what is called the general AI, or general capability of the brain. So when I'm thinking about intelligence, it's not only solving the issue of whose face it is. It's solving many problems at the same time. So I now feel, and I now know that I'm here, and I know that Henry is my friend, and I know many other aspects now with the same brain. In that sense, we're extremely far, because we don't understand how the brain connects associatively all these different aspects that enables me to be intelligent in that sense, in the broad sense, to be able to integrate a lot of information from different aspects, from touch and from vision and from memory and all these aspects, and makes it a strong intelligence. I think we are extremely far from even having a theory about how to build a machine that will be such a kind of a broad. So in terms of years, unless there will be a big breakthrough, and I think I agree that when you learn enough about the brain, which is the ultimate machine that is an example of a success of having a multiple intelligence at the same 1.5 kilos, if we would understand the brain enough, it could be that we shall borrow this technology and implant it into a machine which will become the Frankenstein, whatever we are afraid of. But we're extremely far from it because we don't have even an understanding about how to connect one sense to the other and make a multimodal person. So it will be very fast on the weak AI, very specialized robots that do very specific things, including driving, but in terms of robots that will become Beethoven or Henry, this will take time to replace Henry by a robot.
So, Eric, we understand we already have to deal with weak AI, and that's already a major task for many of the governments or corporations. You spoke about reskilling of the workforce. What does it mean for the current workforce, and what does it mean for most of us who are parents or grandparents? What should our kids include in their studies?
So the last question, I don't know the answer. But let's talk about reskilling, and let's talk about skills. Okay, let's talk about jobs. You know, we codified the task and the 800 job, 2000 tasks, and then we put that in 25 skills. And in fact, we put that again in 5 groups of skills. Okay, and then we looked at, you know, basically the hour work in the developed countries, and then we projected that until 2030. Okay, different scenarios, but I will speak about what I think is the most probable. And so you have 5 groups of skills. You have basically physical and manual skills. Okay, and that's helpful for a truck driver, for example, or for miners. You have basic conceptual skills, and we basic cognitive skills. It's probably an abuse of language compared to real science, but we think, oh, you know how to read, how to compute, and so on. And you have more advanced cognitive skills. You know how to persuade, convince, to discuss, and so on. You have social and emotional skills. So you know basically how to manage, you know how to basically bring people with you into an adventure, and so on and so on. And then you have technical skills, okay, that could go from I know how to program the interface of a web application until I'm a PhD of statistics and I know how to basically do some Python and do AI. Okay, so and then we try to project that. So just for now, 50% of the hour worked are in a developed economy are focused on the 2 first group, meaning physical and manual and basic cognitive. Okay, and then 50% are the 3 other groups. Okay, so then you project and you try to understand with the automation and so on where will be the demand of skill. Okay, what will be in demand? Of course, no surprise, the skills which will be in huge demand will be technical skills. Okay, so that's the first one. Okay, it's like 60% growth in the next 13 years, 15 years. So that's one. The second one, and that's a surprise, social and emotional skill will be in huge demand. Why? Because you need to accompany the transition. And so that will be, and I'm giving lessons and courses in a political science school in France, and they're all desperate. They think that there will be only job for engineers, and so I'm kind of being a bit positive. No, there will be jobs for people that know how to understand what will be disrupted and how to accompany the change, how to be creative. Not saying that engineers are not creative, though. And so then you look at, in the next, again, 15 years, you look at the first two groups that we were discussing. So, physical and manual and basic cognitive will be decreasing by 15%. So, it's big, but it's also relatively small, you know? So that means that there will be some pressure on this first two groups, but it's progressive. There is a lot of inertia in the economy. That will be resulting into the destruction of jobs that I was mentioning. So, if you look at this, and if you now think about society, companies, education, and everything. So first, you will say, okay, I have a mining company. So now I know that I have more people with basic physical and manual skill and basic cognitive than other companies, so I will be more touched. I am a bank. I have more people with basic cognitive skills than other kind of sectors. I will be more touched. I am, of course, in professional services, maybe I'll be less touched, but who knows, you know? So that's the first question. Second, in the future, people who will have more people with technical skills, more people with social and emotional, and more people with advanced cognitive skills will be better. So that means that companies with more people like this will be better. Countries with more people like this will be better. So there is a war on talent which is already visible in the demand, very high demand that is on the job market, on data scientists and so on, but it will increase. So there is a huge question for companies and government on how to reskill people, we were discussing, but also on how to produce sufficient amount of skills for the demand.
So if you take this into account, someone will have to pay for the jobs that are being lost, the people who are unemployed and cannot be reskilled, and someone will have to pay also for developing the new skills of the other part of the population. So exactly, I understand that probably the person that sent you this email saying you should stop your research wanted to say maybe you want to look for other solutions than taxing robots. What could be alternatives to that?
Yes. So, first of all, talking about the consequences of what we are talking about, this is why we need to look at solution right now, because first of all, if the labor is going down simply, you have a huge financing problem. If you take the United States, for example, most of the proceeds, the finance from the United States come from the labor tax. They don't have a value-added tax, for example, in the US. So this would be a huge impact on the finance of a state. The second impact is the impact of social security, because again, the social security is financed by the labor income, its contribution to labor income. So if the labor goes down, you don't have enough money for the social security. And it's even worse, because people losing their job, they will need finance from the state for unemployment. So social security will need even more money. And the third impact is the impact on consumption. If you don't have income, you cannot consume. So if the consumption goes down, the whole economy goes down, and the value-added tax also goes down. So, of course, this is a bit very frightening, but I mean, conceptually, this is possible. So, taxing robots, of course, is one solution. There are other solutions. People are also talking about the minimum unconditional income, which is a very old idea coming from Thomas Paine, for example, already, and more and more people are also advocating this kind of solution. Personally, I think even that a robot tax could be one way to finance such minimum unconditional income, because it's a great idea from a conceptual standpoint, but you need to finance it. I mean, how you tax the robot? Well, yeah, this is something I wanted to say before, but I see two different stages. So the first stage is to tax, for example, the enterprise using the robots with the concept that they are sparing the salaries that they should have paid. By the way, Bill Gates, in an interview, already favored also this kind of approach. He said, it was a few minutes, but he said we should tax robots. And I think what he thought was this kind of ideas to take the salary that you should have paid in comparison to a robot. But I think we could go even further than that. Maybe one day we can even consider, and the EU was thinking about that in a civil law context, that a robot as such, or some kind of artificial intelligence, could become like a new legal entity. And when you think about it, it's not so absurd, because 1 century ago, we were faced with the same problem with a corporation. What is a corporation? You know, have you seen a corporation? Have you shaken hands with a corporation? A corporation is a legal concept. It's a fiction. One day, the legislator said, if you have this, you are a new person, you are a corporation, and you can be sued, you can enter into contract. Maybe one other solution is to create a new legal concept, which could be, we could call it a robot or something else. And then, if I'm quoting this time the Beatles, here comes the taxman. You can consider then taxing the robot as a legal entity, but then you need to find a way to allocate some kind of financial capacity to the robot.
And Yuval Harari, he's written a lot about this, and many of you, probably all of you, have read his book and so on. But so Yuval has made a very clear case that we are where we are now because we are story-driven humans. We're story-driven. But he's also made a very clear case that we're losing trust in stories. And there is a possibility that we're undergoing a major paradigm shift in human society where we are shifting to data-driven humans. Now, how do you become a data-driven human when there's so much data? You need AI to be a data-driven human. That's the next specification that we're entering, to be data-driven, fact-driven, not story, myth, and concepts, but fact-driven humans. I think it's a very exciting future, and I think it's going to come with a lot of exciting new opportunities which we yet cannot even imagine. So, for example, you go around, there's this big thing going on that, you know, all the shops in the cities are closing down because people are buying online and so on. And yes, everybody's going to buy online. But the most fundamental driving force in humanity, for all of us, is the need for social interaction. Yeah. So what boggles my mind when I walk around a shop or go to a clothing shop, especially in Switzerland, it's getting better elsewhere, but there, they still act like normal shopkeepers. What they need to do is, people are buying online, they're not going to the shop to buy, they're going to the shop to have an experience. The shops are going to become entertainment centers, where they go there and they go and even sit together and online shop from the shop. But so we need to think very different. It's going to just, lots of new opportunities are on the horizon. And I think it's going to be a very exciting. We need to plan for this because the disruption is happening and there's no question. We will automate everything and it's going to transform everybody, and we need to plan for exactly the things you said. But I think at the same time, that's a sort of end case scenario. It could well go in a different direction, and we should also realize that there's a great opportunity to be challenged and to come up with completely radical changes in how the company should be building. And instead of saying, okay, I mean, I'm going to lose half my workforce, what do? Think differently. And I think there's so much opportunity to think differently.
Henry, what if you're wrong?
About what?
About a large number of things. Society has a way of stopping progress when it hurts it. I remember flying to Washington in 3 hours with the supersonic. I've heard a lot of futurists. In my profession, we paid a lot of money to futurists who told us, and you're all talking as futurists right now, but we know how to stop sometimes what's against us, and maybe we will decide that it's better to program the machine rather than having the machines which ought to learn, as you described. So the issue is, do you give any probability that this scenario that you're all talking about just doesn't happen? Because Because maybe we have these automatic cars and they have 3 accidents and somebody decides, look, we need the human driving, and we don't have the automatically driven car. And I could take several examples like that. We could clone a lot of things today. We're not doing it. We could have supersonic planes. We're not doing it. And the universe you're describing could be so adverse to a certain class of society that I personally don't think it happens. I just think all this talk about automatic, what do you call it, AI, automatic intelligence?
No, I think, it's an excellent point. It's the best point made this evening. I think that it's very important. We do have a powerful mechanism. AI has a lot of problems and challenges for this to go all the way. It's trust, it's biased. We're worried about male AI. Male AI means that males are sitting there and deciding what the thing should learn, and it biases the whole algorithm against, for males and against. So you could get cultural biases. There's a lot of dangers in AI today, and there's many of them. You could get one truck in America that just steams through and kills, is going to stop the whole automated truck industry. Just one accident, and knowing what the brain needs to do to drive a truck, I don't think that, I think it's very likely that would happen. So there will be, I think, a lot of obstacles. But I don't think, and it can at all, it's zero probability that it can completely stop it. So it will affect, for example, maybe, if airlines, all the flights are automated and cars, and there's a problem, it will hinder one sector. The problem is it's so pervasive. For example, there is no ways we will turn away from AI when it's going to make you live healthy for 20 more years. We will not turn away from that. And there's absolutely, it can. If you had to pool our data together, use AI, you will be able to live healthier. Now, we're not going to turn away from that. If you want to live longer, you want to live forever, you will not turn away from it. So there are things that I think that will happen, and there are things that probably are going to have major obstacles in happening. But where we feel that the impact is not that dangerous, or it's made to feel dangerous, because even one accident, it's less than the terrible things that we think are happening. So human perception of danger is much worse than actual facts. Being fact-driven is going to dominate. We are going to be fact-driven humans. The more we distrust stories, we lose faith in myths and stories, we will resort to facts. So I don't think it will stop it, but I don't think that it will not happen. I think there's no chance that it will stop this wave, but I think it could stop some parts of this wave. You're right.
Maybe, just one comment to follow up on this. I think this point is very interesting. There was a study in America already about artificial intelligence being used by judges, and in fact they used it for prisoners to check whether they can go out on bail or not. And in fact they found out that it was completely biased against black prisoners in particular. So probably the people creating the algorithm, they put unconsciously, hopefully, their bias into the machine. So this is absolutely a point which shows that there's also a need, there's a lot of discussion about this, to put some guidelines, some ethical rules and protection within the system. Another impact that we didn't so far cover, worrying consequence of all this, is that you described the disruption, you described the improvement of AI, but will everybody have access to that? So this could also create a lot of further inequality among people. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine you own a company that has all these possibilities, and you don't give access to these possibilities to other people, this could even increase the inequality among citizens. So this is another threat that we also need to consider.
I want to ask you, when you say fact briefing, who is going to give you the fact? What, you're going to read it in the papers? How are you going to know about facts?
Well,
No, data.
I mean,
Input.
facts are also, even if you get facts, before we get to the validity of facts, but even if you get facts, you do make a story out of the facts. So it's going to take a long time for humanity to transition from story-driven to fact-driven. So, but nevertheless, we will become more data-driven. And so, for example, you will walk around with sensors, and it will monitor your body. And it will know when something is wrong with you. Even if, today when you go and do a blood test, the doctor checks and he says, oh, everything's okay. You're a little bit out of here, but you're still statistically in the thing. Actually, for you, you may either be like super healthy based on that, or you may already have some serious disease showing. Because we're putting it just generally in the context of, but if it's referenced in what we call internally normalized, then you can identify that for you this is wrong. This is how they caught Lance Armstrong, the cyclist, doping. Why? Because normal blood tests did not show anything, because he fell within the normal distribution of chemicals in the blood. But when you compare for him what the distribution should be, it was clear that he was doping. So we're going to be driven by this kind of data. Sensors, it's going to tell you whether you should, something's wrong, you should go to a doctor, not a doctor. We will get to more facts. And just a quick other point. What we already know just from this scientific project is that most facts, even from experiments that are generated by scientists, rigorous scientists, we don't trust these facts. We don't trust any data that any scientist gives us. And actually we got a lot of proof and reason why not to trust it. And a scientist says he's measured this and he shows this. The best way to test it is to try and use it. And we've done that. And we can prove that a lot of data, most of the data, and I'm talking 99% of experimental data, is not true. So how do you know what's the truth? Well, this is where you have to combine lots of different data. And it comes through like a triangulation. It's like GPS. GPS knows you're here, not just by one coordinate, but by 4. And then you actually can triangulate what the truth is. So actually the truth is a derived truth. It's not really a factual truth. But there are ways to get to it. But, we still will have stories for a while.
Can I add a brief comment to Neely? Because I think it's a very important question. And Henry responded to part of it. I just want to give an example of a taxi driver in Paris some years ago, and she refused to use GPS, Waze. She said, I know everything myself and I don't need this machine. It will introduce my brain. Of course, everybody is using GPS because it is much easier for us. And the worry of this woman, the driver, we had a good discussion in Paris about the brain with the taxi driver. She said, so what will happen to this piece of my brain? It is now not doing what it was supposed to do. It will stay idle, empty, waste of brain. That's what she told me. So I want to tell you, in response to the taxi driver, that it's beautiful that you have, so it of course related to my teacher saying that I'm using only 10% of my brain. I try to tell this taxi driver that when you have a place in the brain that is not doing the old task, this will find a new task. There are no idle regions in the brain. It will always occupy something else because it is now free to do something else. And that's the beauty of evolving. And I think this AI, as much as disruptive it is, it enables us, to express things that we are now occupied with, and we don't need to be occupied with. We can be occupied with something else. For me, this something else, it was already mentioned here, is something that is very fundamental. I don't know if you are aware of it, But the emotional part in the brain, the unconscious part of the brain, the thing that I cannot now tell you, but it happens below, my feelings, my associations, my fear, because I don't even know what's going in most of my brain. I'm not aware of it. I can introspect a little bit. So I think, hopefully, that having these three parts of the brain not to deal with the daily life, to take the elevator and all that, it's done automatically, will enable it to express what I think is the most humanistic aspect in me, is emotions. It will enable me to interact with people longer. I don't need to run to get the job here or there. I can interact deeply. I can express a huge part of my brain that is not well used because I'm not, it affects me, but I'm not in connection with it. So I like this machine. I'm very optimistic about this machine because it will free me to do what is essential human. This monkey can also bring things from here to here or do other things, and cow too. But to feel emotions, to interact with people, to create something together, to do creative, it will enable me to do that. So I'm very optimistic as one of the people. You mentioned pessimism and optimism. I'm very much to the optimistic side. In that sense.
I would like to answer to that point. Yeah, it's very encouraging what you say. But let's say, don't you fear that we may lose some skills still? For example, if I learn a language and then I don't practice, for example, I learned German, I don't practice German, eventually my brain loses this capacity. So, okay, maybe I can use another part with more emotion, maybe I can play my guitar, but still I'm losing this skill.
That's what she said, the taxi.
Yeah.
I will lose the skill because it will drive me.
So don't you think this is still an issue?
Maybe I can just tell you a very interesting story. So Formula One drivers, when they drive, right, today no Formula One driver is winning without AI. They want the unfair advantage. And if they don't have an unfair advantage, they don't get into the car. So they want the unfair advantage. How do they get it? And now what's very interesting is that a Formula One car is like, it's an incredible machine, right? And you've got these huge tires. So what do? Is they have cameras that are taking pictures of the tires, because that's the most sensitive thing. If the tire pops, if they brake too soon or whatever, the tire gets hot, it pops, and then they're off the game. So they take lots of photos of these tires, and then they simulate in almost real time to see exactly the heat spots on these tires, to analyze exactly what's going to happen. It turns out that the driver, these are very exceptional people, these Formula One, they're almost not human. These drivers can predict exactly what's happening in these tires. They can tell you that that's happened, and then they check, and the AI, after millions of calculations, will say this is going to happen to the wheel. The Formula One driver already knew it. So I just want to say, when you say that my brain is going to atrophy because I don't use it, you are actually engulfing the phone. The phone is becoming an extension of you. I'm saying this, that we shouldn't be too afraid of technology. I do try to keep my kids away from technology for as long as possible because they're going to live with it forever. But I don't think we should be too afraid of technology, and because something takes over a function doesn't mean to say that we are not enriched by that function.
As long as you call it technology and not intelligence.
It's not intelligence. AI today, we need to be clear, is absolutely not intelligent.
Take away.
I agree.
Okay, this is just a whole bunch of calculations. Lookup table, AlphaGo beating the chess master. AlphaGo equivalently had the computing speed to do the equivalent of 56 years of playing against the grandmaster if you took each game as 1 minute. Okay, so now that's thousands of years. And they can store every game and every probability, and there's no limit to it. This is storing a strategy and probabilities for every sequence that can happen. This is not intelligence. AI is not intelligent. AI is a very sophisticated sum of of numbers that equal x. X combined with y give you z. And these machines can do this and they can adjust it so that this number sums up to this and it sums up to a cat. This is not intelligence, and I think this is very important because most people think, oh my God, intelligence is, the wave is not intelligence, the wave is automation of predictable things. And it's not that we need to be afraid of AI because it's intelligent. It's afraid because it's going to just take away everything that your automated self. It's going to remove, and then you are naked because most of that's an automated thing. And I think that's a good part, and it could be a very exciting part.
Just a little comment on that. There's a description starting in law firm already, and there's a program called ROS. So ROS is a computer actually doing legal research, and paradoxically, guess which area of the law, in which area of the law this program is specialized? This is bankruptcy law.
I'm sorry. Yes, you said that AI can help you to live longer and healthier, but I'm not so sure because the body, our own body, has a mechanism of regulation, homeostasis. Let's say that women, at the time we were checking about breast cancer, we were checking too much breast cancer test, and that was giving the breast cancer level raised. So we understood that sometimes we have cancer cells and they will resorb themselves by themselves. We don't have to do anything. But let's say we have a machine checking our body very well, and at the first brain cancer cell, it will tell you, go to the doctor, you have something dangerous. And maybe we're stopping this own body regulation, you know. So I'm not so sure that at the point it can be not an enemy, but it can be disadvantages, you know. The body, like about the taxi driver, is not wrong also, you know. Imagine you go to that direction, the AI will help you, then we not need any more legs, nothing, you know, will be like a just brain. We need to keep some part of our humanity in ourselves, you know. So there's a middle way, that's what I mean, you know.
I think that when it comes to diseases, that case, what you're talking about, that's because we've treated diseases statistically. I think you need to fasten your seatbelts because you are going to live a hell of a lot longer. And there's no question about it. The mechanisms of aging are being cracked one after another. Anti-aging research is the fastest, by far, growing research area in all of life science. Anti-aging. And it's becoming, there are 9 pathways for what causes aging. But for example, just to give you one, and this one becomes a target for what you eat, how you behave, everything. But it's, for example, the number of mitochondria that you have in your blood. Now, the number of mitochondria, your batteries, right? They're little batteries that produce energy. So every one of your 10 trillion cells in your body has little batteries. And as you age, these batteries go down, so you get slower and everything winds down. So let's boost it. Let's just give you more mitochondria. And there's actually a very interesting startup in Israel called Minovia. So if you want to invest in the most promising startup in Israel, it's called Minovia. Amazing scientist who has developed it. They take stem cells, they enrich the stem cells with mitochondria, and then they put the stem cell gets, it's like a blood transfusion. Stem cells go all over the body, and in the brain, for example, they turn into what's called microglia, which is like a special cell, and the microglia go around and they donate batteries to all the cells that don't have enough batteries. And then suddenly you're rejuvenated. The progress in longevity research is astounding. So hang on, because you are going to live a hell of a lot longer, and AI is allowing us to piece together the millions of proteins and exactly what they're doing, when they're doing it, how do they do it, and how it works for you. There's no question that this kind of data analysis is going to advance, and we will defy all homeostatic rules. That's science. That's science. We will actually change the game with our own perceptions about how well we live, how long we live, whether we get a disease. This is not God-given. It's something that science can change.
Thank you.
One last question.
One question.
One last question.
You said before that this is going to be a data-driven society. What are you going to live in? The only problem I have with that, who is going to control that data? That's my worry.
That's the worry.
Yes, that's the big worry. It's maybe already a bit late, frankly speaking. And maybe it's because of my position, but another way we were discussing alternative of taxing robot, of course, is taxing data. This is another very huge now discussion around the world about it. The OECD BEPS project is focusing on that, because with all the data we are giving for free, we think we are giving them for free. In fact, all these companies are using our data and making a lot of money. So that's also, by the way, another approach to bring revenues to finance the impact of disruption.
But just to add to that, not just to give from taxing data, but it also opens up new possibilities for how you can earn revenue yourself. You are a data source. Everything you do is a data source. And so far, Facebook has 1 billion free contributors of data. But if the model changes, and it probably could and would, where people become aware of the value. Right now you're not aware of the value of the data you have for medicine to help somebody else get better. But as you become aware of it, you're going to start charging for your data. I say, I'm going to give my data to the dentist because it's going to help another dentist, but the dentist is going to pay. Yeah. I'm going to get 1 cent here and 1 cent, and then eventually I just check my app and I'll see all the money coming in from me as a data source just as I walk along the beach. So there's going to be very interesting new ways that we are going to be functioning. It's going to be exciting.
Maybe on this point, what is interesting, and connecting your question with Lily's questions, the regulators today are either inactive or they are too late and stopping the benefits that you as an individual could have from data being made available. If you just think in terms of healthcare, all the data that could be gathered from your medical records and all our medical records could help improve healthcare dramatically. Exactly. But if you look at it today in Switzerland, all actors are prohibited from storing and working with this data. So we have the two extremes. We have in some cases total laxism, which is enabling Facebook, etc., to do whatever they want. And on the other hand, we have regulators basically stopping the improvement of life for all of us because they are just not understanding how to deal with that.
So our governments are clearly inept and in fact completely wasting.
So the very last question.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. But in parallel, we also are in another revolution, which is blockchain. And probably blockchain will be the answer to that. Because in the blockchain, you have the possibility of anonymization. And people are afraid to share their own data because it's linked to their identity. And in the near future, we will be able to do the same without knowing that your data is yours.
Okay, so at least the discussion shows that we could continue for hours. But on one hand, Xavier must leave us right now, and I see that some of you are at the saturation point of what they can get as information, and some others are still very curious. So I would like to thank our speakers because it has been